It was an icy December night when Caleb Hartley first noticed them, a family huddled just outside the front entrance of the Crescent Harbor Hotel, which he had inherited from his father. Snow was falling in heavy clumps, and the winds whipped down the empty streets, making the family appear even smaller and more vulnerable against the cold. Caleb watched from inside the lobby's grand windows, hesitating. The hotel wasn't doing well, and truthfully, he hadn't planned on taking any chances with anything outside business operations. But he couldn't look away. The father had wrapped his arms around his wife and young daughter, trying to shelter them with his own thin coat. Caleb saw the girl shiver, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit, her mother rubbing her shoulders for warmth. He knew the risks of bringing strangers into the hotel, especially when every dollar mattered more than ever. But there was something about the man's determined face as he shielded his family that pulled at Caleb. He knew that if he stepped away now, the image of that shivering girl would haunt him long after the storm had passed. Steeling himself, Caleb put on his coat and stepped out into the biting wind. The cold hit him like a slap, slicing through his clothes, but he ignored it. "Excuse me," he called out, careful to keep his voice even and non-threatening. "I can't imagine it's safe for you out here in this weather." The father turned slowly, straightening with obvious effort, his body tense as he shielded his wife and child. There was a wariness in his eyes, a mix of exhaustion and defiance. "We're not causing any trouble, sir," he said, gripping his daughter's hand more tightly. Snowflakes clung to his unshaven face, melting slowly. "I didn't say you were," Caleb replied gently, moving closer. He could see now how pale and tired they all looked. The snow was collecting on the woman's headscarf, and the little girl's hands were trembling. "Listen. It's too cold out here. Why don't you come in and warm up? At least for a little while." The woman's eyes met her husband's, and for a moment they seemed to communicate silently. She looked at their daughter, who was trying to stifle a cough. The man Jack, Caleb would later learn, hesitated, torn between pride and his family's safety. At last he nodded, shoulders slumping in defeat. "Thank you," he said gruffly. He guided his wife and daughter toward the door, and together they stepped inside. The warmth of the lobby enveloped them immediately, bringing a flush of color to their pale faces. The family hovered near the entrance, still wary, as if expecting to be thrown out at any moment. Caleb felt a pang of sympathy. He could only imagine what they'd been through. Caleb approached again, his decision solidifying with every step. "We have a room open," he said, keeping his tone casual. "You're welcome to stay the night if you need it." The father's expression shifted from guarded to deeply grateful, though there was a hint of hesitation, as if he were waiting for the catch. "Thank you," he said again, this time with more sincerity. "We won't cause any trouble. My name's Jack. This is my wife, Eliza, and our daughter, Sadie." Caleb Hartley, he introduced himself, offering a small, reassuring smile. "It's no trouble. I'll have some dinner sent up to your room." Caleb watched as Maggie, the head housekeeper, led the family away, offering soft words of comfort. He felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. The hotel was already facing hard times, and he knew there would be questions from guests and staff. But as he returned to his office, the image of Sadie's wide eyes and blue lips stayed with him. No matter the cost, he knew he'd done the right thing. The following morning, Caleb knocked gently on the door of the room he'd given them. Jack opened it, looking more rested but still wary. Inside, Eliza was braiding Sadie's hair, their daughter's laughter filling the air as if, for a moment, the weight of their troubles had lifted. "Come in," Jack said, stepping aside. The room was modest, but it was warm and clean, a far cry from the freezing streets. Caleb entered, feeling slightly out of place in his pressed shirt and slacks. He noticed the way Jack and Eliza exchanged glances, as if they were bracing for bad news. "I just wanted to check in," Caleb said. "See how you're doing." "We're grateful," Jack said, his voice quiet but firm. "But we don't want to overstay our welcome." "You're not," Caleb assured him. "Can I ask what happened?" Jack hesitated, then nodded. He seemed to understand that honesty was the only currency they had. "I was a carpenter," he began, eyes fixed on the floor. "Good work, steady work. but a fall from a scaffolding changed that. He paused, absently rubbing his knee. I was out of commission for months. No job, no income. By the time I was ready to work again, no one wanted to hire a man with a limp. We used up everything we had just trying to stay afloat. Eliza spoke next, her voice soft but filled with emotion. We moved from shelter to shelter. We tried everything. But it's hard when you've got a child. We didn't want Sadie to grow up in places like that. Caleb nodded, absorbing their story. The words stirred something deep within him, a mix of anger at their plight and determination to help. He glanced at Sadie, who was now drawing with a pencil she'd found, completely absorbed. You don't have to worry for now, he said. Stay as long as you need. Jack met his eyes, gratitude flickering there. But Caleb could see it wasn't enough. Jack didn't want charity. He needed purpose, a chance to reclaim his pride. Caleb had seen it before in men who had been brought low by circumstances beyond their control. Jack, he said slowly. Have you ever worked on hotel properties? Jack's eyes brightened slightly. I've done repairs, some renovations, that kind of thing. Caleb nodded thoughtfully. The hotel had been in need of repairs for months. The maintenance team was small and overworked, and there were countless tasks piling up. How would you feel about coming on as a part-time handyman here? Nothing permanent, but it could give you something to do while you get back on your feet. I can offer a small salary and you'd keep the room. Eliza covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. Jack looked between his wife and Caleb, his voice thick. I don't know what to say, thank you. I'll work as hard as you need. Then let's start today, Caleb said, a small smile breaking through. There's plenty to keep you busy. That afternoon, Jack got to work, repairing a leaky pipe in one of the back hallways. Caleb watched him for a while, impressed by the man's determination and skill. It was as if Jack were pouring all of his frustrations, fears, and hopes into every nail he hammered and every bolt he tightened. Soon, Jack moved on to other tasks, patching cracked tiles, replacing broken fixtures, and even helping touch up paint in the dining room. His limp slowed him down at times, but he never complained. When he finished each job, he sought out more. Eliza, too, found ways to help. She assisted the housekeeping staff with folding linens, tidying rooms, and organizing storage. Her quiet efficiency and gentle manner quickly won over the staff, and before long, she was a familiar and welcome presence. Sadie spent most of her days near her mother or playing in the lobby. The staff adored her, often slipping her treats from the kitchen or pausing to chat with her as she played with her stuffed rabbit. For the first time in months, Caleb felt a glimmer of hope. The family had become a part of the hotel's rhythm, and their presence, far from being a burden, brought a sense of warmth and resilience to the place. But even as Caleb found comfort in their progress, he couldn't ignore the larger problem: the hotel itself was struggling. Bookings were down, repairs were costly, and bills were piling up. Every day brought new challenges, and even with Jack's help, the Crescent Harbor Hotel felt like a ship slowly sinking. Caleb spent sleepless nights going over the books, trying to find a way out. He refused to let his father's legacy crumble. But hope, it seemed, was running out until one crisp January morning, everything changed. Then, one crisp January morning, everything seemed poised for a change. Caleb was standing near the front desk, discussing a delivery issue with the concierge, when a long, sleek limousine pulled up outside the hotel entrance. The vehicle was a rare sight in their part of town, and as it came to a stop, guests and staff alike turned to watch. Caleb straightened, unsure of what to expect but sensing that whoever stepped out would not be a typical visitor. The chauffeur opened the door, and out stepped a tall man in a tailored charcoal gray coat. He moved with a confidence that suggested wealth, power, and perhaps a touch of danger. His gaze swept over the hotel's aging facade with keen interest, lingering on every worn detail. Caleb felt a flash of nerves. He knew the building showed its years' scuffed floors, chipped paint, and tired decor. Despite Jack's hard work, the hotel was still struggling to keep up appearances. Taking a breath to steady himself, Caleb stepped forward, extending his hand. Welcome to the Crescent Harbor Hotel. I'm Caleb Hartley. The man's handshake was firm. Richard Lawson, he replied with a warm smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I was passing through the area and thought I'd stop by. Word of your hotel's unique history caught my interest. Caleb nodded, masking his surprise. We're proud of our history. My father built this place. Is that so? Richard glanced around, his eyes assessing the lobby's grandeur despite its signs of wear. It must be difficult keeping a place like this running. So much to maintain. Caleb forced a smile. He wasn't about to show weakness. Every challenge has its rewards. Indeed, Richard said, his tone conversational but laced with curiosity. Would you mind giving me a brief tour? I'd love to see what makes this place so special. The request was unexpected, but Caleb saw no harm in it. If anything, it was an opportunity to showcase the charm of the Crescent Harbor. Of course, he replied, leading the way. They moved through the main lobby, past the ornate staircase that wound up to the upper floors, and into the dining hall, where the scent of freshly baked bread hung in the air. Caleb spoke about the hotel's storied past, the notable guests who had stayed over the years, and the memories embedded in every corner. Richard listened attentively, nodding in the right places, but his eyes missed nothing: the peeling wallpaper, the worn carpets, the faint sound of dripping water from an unseen leak. Caleb felt the weight of those observations like stones in his chest, but he pressed on. When they reached the south wing, they passed by Jack, who was repairing a cracked windowsill. Sadie was playing nearby, her stuffed rabbit never far from her side, while Eliza supervised with a quiet smile. Caleb paused. This is Jack, he said, his voice softening. He's been helping us out while he and his family get back on their feet. They've become, well, part of the place. Richard's expression changed, becoming thoughtful. It's rare to see such personal care both for the hotel and for the people within it. I respect that. Caleb nodded, feeling a flicker of hope, though he didn't dare show it. It's what my father would have wanted. As they walked back toward the lobby, Richard was silent for a moment, as if weighing something important. Finally, he spoke. You know, I've been looking for a historic property to invest in, somewhere with character and untapped potential. I think this place could be exactly what I'm looking for. Caleb's heart leapt, but he forced himself to stay calm. What kind of investment are you talking about? Richard smiled, sensing his eagerness. With the right funding, you could restore this hotel to its former glory. Updates to the rooms, modern comforts, while preserving the charm, it could become a destination again. I'd provide the capital, but you'd remain in control. A partnership, if you will. The offer was tantalizing, but Caleb's instincts held him back. He'd seen investors swoop in, promise the world, and then strip businesses of their soul. I won't compromise what this hotel stands for, he said firmly. My father built it with care and integrity. Exactly why I'm interested, Richard said smoothly. I'd expect nothing less. Think of it as preserving a legacy while making it thrive. The conversation ended with no immediate commitment, but Caleb felt something stirring inside him, a sense of possibility he hadn't dared entertain in months. As Richard left the hotel, promising to follow up soon, Caleb returned to his office, his thoughts a whirlwind. An investment like that could be the answer to all his problems. But it could also change everything. He wasn't sure yet if he was ready for it. Over the next few days, Caleb's mind raced. He knew the hotel needed a lifeline, but he also worried about what strings might come attached. Jack noticed his distraction and asked about it one evening as they worked side by side repairing a creaking floorboard. You okay, boss? Jack asked, his tone light but laced with genuine concern. Caleb hesitated, then decided to be honest. There's a chance for new funding. A way to fix this place up and bring back the guests. But it might come with risks. Jack nodded slowly. I get it. Hard to know if you're making a deal or a mistake. Exactly, Caleb said, relieved to have someone who understood. I just want to do right by this place. By everyone here. Jack laid down his tools. You've done more than most would. Whatever happens, You'll make the right call." Caleb appreciated the words, but they didn't ease his doubts. He spent hours poring over plans, thinking of how he might use an investment to revitalize the hotel. He spoke to trusted staff members, sought advice, and weighed every option. Through it all, Jack and Eliza continued their quiet, steady work, and Sadie's laughter filled the lobby, reminding Caleb of why he'd taken a chance on them in the first place. One evening, as the sun set over the snow-covered town, a letter arrived from Richard Lawson. It outlined his terms in clear, precise language. The investment was real substantial enough to transform the Crescent Harbor, but so were the expectations. Richard wanted regular updates, a say in major decisions, and ultimately a percentage of future profits. Caleb stared at the paper, feeling the weight of it. He knew that saying yes would bring the change the hotel desperately needed, but it would also mean giving up some control. It was a risk, one that could either save everything or unravel it further. He decided he needed more time to think. The stakes were too high to rush. Just when Caleb thought things couldn't grow more complicated, another challenge arose. A key supplier, aware of the hotel's struggles, suddenly demanded advance payment for future orders, a demand the hotel's fragile finances couldn't immediately meet. It was a blow that left Caleb scrambling to find a solution. And through it all, the knowledge that a decision loomed over Richard's offer gnawed at him. There were no guarantees, only hard choices. Caleb would have to decide whether to take a leap of faith with a man he barely knew or to find another way to keep the Crescent Harbor afloat. As the snow fell softly outside the Crescent Harbor Hotel, Caleb paced the length of his office. The letter from Richard Lawson clenched tightly in his hand. It had been days since the investor made his proposal, and every minute that passed felt like another drop in the hourglass of the hotel's future. The building was hanging on by threads. Even with Jack's efforts to mend every cracked tile and broken fixture, the reality was that they needed more, and much more. He had gone over Richard's terms a dozen times. The money was enough to breathe life back into the place, to restore its charm, update the amenities, and draw guests in droves. But Richard would gain influence, a voice in decisions Caleb had always made alone. Trusting someone else with his father's legacy didn't come easily. As Caleb wrestled with his thoughts, there was a knock at the door. Jack stepped inside, wiping his hands on a rag. He'd been repairing a worn-out staircase, and streaks of dust covered his shirt. "Got a minute?" Jack asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "I heard from Eliza. That supplier you've been dealing with, he's not backing down, is he?" Caleb sighed, running a hand through his hair. "No. He wants advance payment for all future orders. If we can't cover it, we're out of options." Jack nodded, absorbing the weight of it. "I'm sorry, Caleb. I know you're carrying a lot." Caleb sat down heavily, the tension in his shoulders refusing to ease. "It's not your fault, Jack. I brought you and your family in knowing things were bad. I just didn't realize it would get this desperate so quickly." Jack was quiet for a moment, then spoke softly. "You know, you've given us a place when no one else would. Whatever decision you make, we'll back you. Just don't carry it alone." The words resonated deeply, and Caleb nodded, grateful for the support. Jack left him alone again, and Caleb turned his attention back to the window. Snow continued to fall, blanketing the town in white. He knew what he had to do. There was no saving the hotel if he didn't take a chance. He reached for the phone and dialed the number Richard had left. A week later, Richard Lawson returned to the Crescent Harbor Hotel. This time, there was no small talk, no leisurely tour. Richard was all business, and Caleb felt the weight of every decision in the man's handshake. They sat in Caleb's office, papers spread across the desk. Richard explained how the funding would be allocated: renovations, modernized guest rooms, improvements to the kitchen. Caleb listened carefully, interjecting only when he needed clarification. When they were done, Richard leaned back, his eyes sharp. "You're ready, then?" Caleb hesitated for only a second before nodding. "I am." They shook hands, sealing the agreement. A wave of relief and apprehension washed over Caleb. Relief, because the hotel now had a fighting chance, and apprehension because he had placed his trust in a man whose true intentions remained somewhat unknown. The work began almost immediately. Contractors arrived, carrying supplies and equipment through the lobby. Rooms were stripped down to their bones and rebuilt with elegant furnishings. Jack threw himself into the renovations, working alongside the contractors, and even Eliza joined in, helping coordinate logistics. The hotel bustled with activity, and for the first time in months, there was a palpable sense of hope. Caleb watched it all unfold, determined to ensure that the hotel didn't lose its soul in the process. He worked closely with the design teams, insisting that the Crescent Harbor's unique character, the vintage woodwork, the antique light fixtures, the ornate mirrors be preserved. When Richard visited to inspect the progress, he seemed impressed. "You've got a strong vision," Richard said one afternoon as they walked through a newly refurbished hallway. "I respect that." Caleb nodded, his guard still up. "I'm not just going to hand this place over. I hope that's clear." "It's very clear," Richard replied, his tone oddly sincere. "I don't want to change what makes it special. I want to make it thrive." The two men shared a brief moment of understanding, but Caleb still kept his guard up. Partnerships could sour quickly, and he couldn't afford to be naive. As the renovations neared completion, the hotel began to draw attention. Local newspapers wrote about the Crescent Harbor's exciting comeback, and curious passers-by stopped to peer inside at the gleaming new interiors. Caleb started receiving inquiries for bookings, and soon, the rooms were filling faster than he could have imagined. The revitalized dining hall, now a sophisticated restaurant, became a local favorite. Guests raved about the blend of old-world charm and modern comfort. Through it all, Jack and Eliza remained a cornerstone of the operation. Jack was promoted to head of maintenance, a role he took immense pride in. Caleb watched him teach younger staff members with a quiet authority and a spark of confidence that had been absent when he first arrived. Eliza, meanwhile, had become an integral part of guest services, her kindness and attention to detail making her a favorite among visitors. Sadie's laughter continued to echo through the hallways, a reminder of how far they'd all come. She had become a fixture in the lobby, often greeting guests with a smile and her beloved stuffed rabbit. Even Richard seemed fond of her, stopping occasionally to chat and marvel at her boundless energy. One evening, after most of the guests had retired to their rooms, Caleb stood in the lobby, watching the fire crackle in the grand fireplace. The renovations were done, the hotel was thriving, and yet he still felt a lingering weight. Richard approached, holding 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to Caleb. "To the Crescent Harbor's future," Richard said, raising his glass. Caleb clinked his glass with Richard's but didn't drink immediately. "To the people who made it possible," he added, glancing around at the staff, the guests, and finally at Jack and Eliza, who were chatting quietly near the reception desk. They drank in silence, each lost in thought. Caleb knew the partnership with Richard had saved the hotel, but it had also come with sacrifices, trust, pride, and a piece of himself he'd never fully get back. Still, as he watched the life returning to the hotel, he realized that it had been worth it. The Crescent Harbor thrived. It was a beacon of hope, a place of second chances and new beginnings. Caleb knew there would be challenges ahead, there always were, but for the first time in a long time, he believed they could weather anything together. Weeks turned into months, and the Crescent Harbor Hotel flourished in ways Caleb Hartley had once only dreamed. The transformation was remarkable, rooms fully booked, guests delighted by the blend of old-world charm and modern comforts, and glowing reviews spreading the word far beyond their small coastal town. Caleb marveled at the energy and life that now pulsed through the halls of his father's legacy. Every crack and faded curtain had been replaced or renewed, and the warmth of the staff matched the polished elegance of their surroundings. Jack was thriving, leading the maintenance team with dedication and pride. He oversaw repairs and renovations with a meticulous eye, often working alongside younger staff who admired his skill and quiet authority. Eliza had become a beloved figure among guests, her kindness and warmth making each visitor feel at home. Even Sadie had blossomed, her laughter echoing through the lobby, her ever-present stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm, bringing smiles to staff and guests alike. The work had been demanding, but it felt like the start of something lasting. Through it all, Richard Lawson's involvement had remained consistent yet unexpectedly supportive. While Caleb had worried about potential conflicts and power struggles, Richard seemed genuinely interested in preserving the hotel's character. He stepped back from the more hands-on aspects of operations, offering strategic advice while respecting Caleb's vision. Their relationship, once fraught with tension, grew into a partnership built on mutual respect. One day, as Caleb stood in the newly refurbished dining hall, Richard approached him, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You've done well, Caleb," he said, his voice free of the edge it once carried. "The Crescent Harbor feels alive again." Caleb nodded, still wary but softened by months of collaboration. "It's not just me. Everyone here has worked hard to make it happen." Richard's eyes met his, genuine pride shining through. "I know. And that's why I'm going to propose something different." He paused, as if weighing his next words carefully. "I've been considering scaling back my involvement here. You've proven you don't need me to keep this place running." Caleb's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'll retain a small stake," Richard said, smiling faintly. "But only as a silent partner. This is your hotel, Caleb. You've shown you can lead it without me steering the ship." Relief and gratitude washed over Caleb, almost overwhelming in their intensity. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I appreciate that more than you know." The conversation ended on a handshake, one that felt genuine and final. From that moment on, Richard's presence at the hotel became rare, though he occasionally visited as a guest rather than a partner. The Crescent Harbor was once again fully under Caleb's care. With Richard stepping back, Caleb focused all his energy on building the community the hotel had become known for. Special events brought together locals and travelers, charitable initiatives were launched to give back, and holiday celebrations lit up the town with joy. Caleb even collaborated with Jack and Eliza on a new project transforming an unused section of the hotel into a community space for art classes and workshops. It was a hit, drawing people from across the region. The staff thrived as well. Jack, officially the hotel's head of maintenance, was a mentor to younger workers, passing down his knowledge with patience and pride. Eliza continued to handle guest services with a gentle touch that made everyone feel special. Sadie became something of an unofficial mascot for the hotel, often charming guests with impromptu drawings and shy smiles. Caleb made sure she had every opportunity to learn and grow, supporting her education as part of his commitment to their family's future. On a summer evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and bathed the hotel in warm light, Caleb stood on the balcony overlooking the bustling courtyard below. Jack and Eliza were chatting with guests. Laughter and music floated on the breeze, and Sadie played with other children, her rabbit clutched tightly in one hand. Caleb took a deep breath, feeling the weight that had once burdened him finally lift. The Crescent Harbor was more than a hotel again, it was a home. A place of new beginnings and lasting connections. He thought of his father and knew, with certainty, that the man who built this place would be proud of what it had become. Turning away from the view, Caleb walked back inside, ready to join the life and laughter that filled the hotel he had fought so hard to save. Together they would keep building, one day at a time, and he had no doubt that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a family. The future, at last, was bright.